G'day, I'm Sharon and I am very grateful to be in a position to show you Robyn's Singer Capri from 1980. We know that it was 1980 because she got it as a gift, and my word, it's a machine of its time. This has been lots of fun to play with, even though the machine is now getting to the point where some of its things don't work quite as they ought to anymore. This is the Singer Capri. This is for how much pressure is going on the foot where it's pressing on your fabric. We have got the bobbin winder here and the spool pins there. This is the needle drop position. It can be moved from left to right. So the needle was moving as I did that. This is the stitch width. Robyn's actually put a note up to remind herself about the width. And if you want to do that to your machines, there's no harm in doing it at all. This is the stitch selector, A through to K, and here's the indicators of what those pieces do. I, J and K are parts of the 4-step buttonhole. This is stitch length. This is how far the machine moves forward with each stitch. 0 is obviously not moving forward, and the other ones, as you get a bigger number, you're going higher. So it doesn't really matter what the numbers represent, as long as you know 5 is bigger than 0. The reverse key here gets pressed in, and this drops the feed dogs. So the feed dogs went down as I did that, and they've just come up again. On the end of the machine, we've got the power plug. There is no on-off switch on this machine. A lot of these older machines have a different mechanism in the flywheel. So the flywheel is the bit on the right-hand side of your machine that goes around as you're sewing. When you declutch the machine, you turn the middle bit in the opposite direction to the outer bit of that flywheel, and it stops the needle going up and down when the motor's going. So it's the sort of thing you use when you're winding a bobbin. On the back, this is the light switch. Whilst I'm happy to hold this machine by this handle, I will not hold the handle of the old vinyl cover. Place the thread that you're going to wind onto the bobbin onto a spool pin and go under that. It needs to be firmly under that because that's the tension for winding a bobbin. There's a hole in this one. I haven't found it to be particularly useful. Thread from the inside to the outside through one of these holes. Place it on the bobbin winder, click across to the right, and then depress the foot control. What you're supposed to do to disconnect this is to hold it and turn the one in the middle towards you. And that should mean that this doesn't go up and down. However, in this particular machine, it's quite elderly. It's having trouble with that. I'm going to give it a little bit of help. Fixing this problem on Robyn's machine would require time, oil, and possibly parts. It wasn't worth doing. So trust me when I say declutch and then run the machine to get the bobbin wound. It won't really hurt it if it goes up and down. So holding that thread up, I let enough thread wind on the bobbin so that it won't come undone, and then I trim off close to the bobbin. In my particular case, I'm going to continue while I wind the bobbin. I don't want to go too fast, and I do want to make sure that that is properly in there. And there it is. If you were going to wind an entire bobbin, eventually it's going to start going slower because it's running into this piece here. Stop, over to the left, and pick it up, and there's your bobbin. This is the bobbin case for the machine with the little arm going straight up. I'm going to put the thread in so that the bobbin is winding clockwise. Then I'm going to put a finger on that, or a thumb on that, and come out of this piece at the side, go up, and I hope you heard that click. That indicates that it's actually gone completely into that tensioning device there. I'll show you when we get down to the bottom how to put that into the machine. To thread the main body of the machine, thread, doesn't matter which spool pin it's on. I'm actually using this one because this one's a bit bent. This one has a hole on this guide, and you go from the back to the front through the hole. I'm then going to go through the hole that's on the right side of this one, also from the back to the front. So I've gone from the reel of thread through 2 guides, and now I'm going to be looking down the front of the machine. Bring the thread down and through the hook on the right, and then go under the tension discs, missing the wire on the left, come up to 1 o'clock and then back, and that will put your thread onto a little hook that's in the tension disc. You then go down and under the wire, come back up through this guide, which you click back into. There's a hole on the take-up lever, go through it from right to left, and then come down and back through that same guide from right to left. In here there is a guide at the bottom of it. You go in it from the right to the left. There is a guide above the needle where the screw is for putting a needle in. You go into it from the right to the left, and then you go through the eye of the needle from the front to the back. Singer regular sewing machine needles will fit in this machine. You use a smaller size of needle for a finer weight of thread and fabric, and if you are sewing something really thick and heavy, then you use a bigger needle. Make sure you always put the flat to the back in the machine with the groove down the front. So I haven't got the thread caught around the needle anywhere, it's just going from the front to the back through the eye, and then I can go through the foot and out to the back. Open the cover. The bobbin case is going to go in with the arm uppermost. If you pull this piece out at the front, the bobbin gets held while you put the bobbin case in and then release. There's a little bit of play with that, but it can't go all over the place. I'm then going to hold my needle thread and wind forward through 1 stitch, and when my take-up lever gets back up to the top, that will have pulled my bobbin thread to the top. Bring them both out and underneath to the back. The extension table for the machine slips from the left across the 2 pins, go into the machine. You can tighten it up. Extension tables support the fabric while we're sewing, especially if you're sewing with a stretch fabric. The fabric will be pulling off both the front and the back part of that little piece where the needle goes through. It will be stretching the fabric while it sews just with the weight of the fabric. So supporting more of the fabric is a really good idea. Don't have things dragging on the floor. Put them on your lap and try and make sure that they're not dragging on the machine. Otherwise you make the machine work much harder to pull the fabric through. I'm on stitch A, which does straight stitch and zigzag. If I have the width on 0, it will do a straight stitch. The length is determined by the stitch length on the front. I usually run them pretty close to 3. And if I turn the width up, in this case I'm turning it up to 4, that will turn it into a zigzag. I've got the tension set to 5, and one of the things that you will notice happening is that this little wire here, as I sew, it gets pulled up and down. That is part of how these machines are supposed to operate. When I get to the end of what I'm doing, I need to make sure that the take-up lever is brought all the way to the top, and that means that the machine has finished its stitch. I can then lift the presser foot, pull the fabric to the back. This machine has a cutter on the back of this shaft, so I just put pressure on the thread on both sides when it's in that little groove, and it will cut. And there is my straight and zigzag stitching, front and back. As I am stitching, I'm going to do reverse. So as long as I hold the R key in, the machine will go in reverse. I'm now going to move on to stitch B, which is a 3-step zigzag. I will need to give it a width because any zigzag with no width is a straight stitch. I'm going to give it 5. I don't want this one to have a particularly long stitch length. I'm taking it down to 2. This is a good stitch for applying elastic. Make sure that the take-up lever is fully up before I take fabric out of the machine. And there are there's the 3-step zigzag and the reversing. Stitch C is the blind hem stitch. There is no blind hem foot for this machine, which makes it a bit more complicated to do. I'm going to do a blind hem, but I'm going to start with stitch A and a no width because I don't want it to do zigzag, and I do want a very long stitch, so I'm going up to 5. I have folded my fabric up twice, and I'm now just going to stitch along about a bit under 1 centimetre, bit under 1/2 inch from the edge, so that I make sure I catch down both of these inside. This is a basting stitch which I find to be very useful when I'm doing blind hem. That stitch is going to be removed at the end. To do the blind hem, I go to stitch C. I'm going to keep the stitch at about 3, and the width I make go wide. Have the main body of whatever fabric you're using wrong side up, and now turn that hem you just made back to expose the edge. I am assuming at the moment that the machine has actually been nice enough to put the needle into the far left position. You may have to find that bit of the stitch. The idea is that periodically the stitch is going to go into the far left, and then it will do some straight stitches, and then it will go over to the far left again. And what you're trying to do is make sure that when it goes to the far left, it just takes a small bite out of this fabric, and that's what you're aiming at. on the side that I've just stitched, you can see it's catching that edge. The more of it catches, the bigger on the right side these bits will be. So what you're trying to do is to make sure you catch as little of it as possible. And then when you're finished, just take out that straight stitch. To change the foot, I'm going to attach the zipper foot. I need to unscrew the big thumb screw on the left and remove that foot. This is the zipper foot. Get it under and up, tighten it, and then use a screwdriver to further tighten it. These feet have got adjustment. What you need to do is put the needle in the center position, so put stitch width to 0 whilst having the center position here, and then move the foot across until the needle is in that position, and then tighten it. So the idea is that the needle is fully enclosed in that position. The position I have just put that in is the correct position for when I am sewing with the teeth of a zip on the right side. So that will just stitch along there and it won't interfere with those teeth. And you can see that in fact I could be stitching much closer to that zip and the foot would still not interfere with the teeth. Zipper feet are much narrower than a regular foot on your sewing machine, and if you haven't got that foot in the right place, then the foot does not connect with the feed dogs that are underneath, and they're the things that are trying to move the fabric along. If they're not connecting, you're going to have to help it. Makes more sense to let the machine do as much of the work as it can. Yes, you can help it, but you shouldn't have to do all of it yourself. The machine should be doing the majority of the work. And you can see how close I've stitched to the teeth. To stitch on this side, however, I need to move the foot. Oops, I'll need to have the needles up and move the foot over to the right. So that it's coming down in that side of the foot. Do hand wind a bit and make sure you're not going to hit the needle onto the foot, because that will break your needle. If you're using a chunky zip or something fairly large, the machine is not going to let you sew onto the teeth of the zip. A dress zip, on the other hand, it's a bit easier to wander too close to the teeth and then the zip won't work anymore. So you need to stay far enough away from it that you don't interfere with what those teeth are doing. Once again, to remove the foot, use the thumb screw. There is actually a little bit of play in the shank of the machine that helps you get things in there. Not much, but a little bit. Make sure the foot is all the way up and tighten with a screwdriver. How's this for fun? Machines in 1980 had a whole heap of their attachments with orange plastic on them. If you have one of these old vinyl covers for your machine, please do not carry your machine by the handle. Those old vinyl covers are a trap waiting to explode in your hand. Unfortunately, the vinyl has deteriorated at this point and the handle can come completely off. Make sure if you're carrying your machine in something like that, that you have two hands underneath your machine. Hope you've enjoyed today's trip down memory lane, and thanks to Robyn for loaning me her machine. And I shall see you next time.